So today we're going to talk about audience recognition. What is the audience and why do we need to understand our audience or the receiver in order to communicate effectively? So let's explore that. All right. So whenever you write something and whenever you write a blog or manual or you send a message to your friend or family, all right, so someone reads your message or report. Whenever you write something, there is always a person who receives it or who reads it, all right. So your audience, the person who read your message can be individual or a group of readers, all right, and then you communicate with them. So in order to communicate effectively, you need to understand and recognize audience, all right. If your audience is not engaged, if you haven't considered their intellectual level, their level of understanding, their qualification, their context, the background, then the communication error will occur. So whenever we communicate, we do not communicate in a vacuum. Uh, it means that uh, we communicate, and there's always a person who receive our communication, who understands our communication, who responds to our communication. So there is always a person who is receiving your information or reading your message. So if there is no audience, if there is no reader, what's the purpose of writing something? All right, so there must be a second person or a receiver or a reader in order to communicate effectively. So when we write something, we write let's say an article about about, let's say, artificial intelligence, or we give an presentation, oral presentation, or we convene a meeting. So all are involved, uh, all these concepts are involved with the audience. I mean, there should be some people who should be part of this communication. So that is your audience. All right, so the first question is, you need to ask before writing anything. I mean, before writing anything, you need to understand your audience, and you should ask yourself, who is your audience? Who is going to read your message? All right, what does this reader or listener already knew? All right, what does this reader or listener already know? What does this reader or listener not know? How much information about this topic the listener has, and how much they don't know? All right, so you need to consider these questions before writing. What must you write or say to ensure that your audience understands your point? So whatever you write, you should make sure that your writing must be effective so that your reader or receiver can understand your point of view. Your audience can be one person or multiple audience. For example, if you have sent a text message to a friend, so your friend is one person who is receiving or reading your message. So your audience consists of one person. And let's say you have shared something on Facebook, you have posted a message on Facebook. Now, hundreds and thousands of your friends will read your comment or instruction. So now that audience is multiple audience. We also need to understand that, okay, what is the person's position in relation to your job's title? All right, how whom you are writing, how he is related to you and your job or your career. All right, what connection do you have with the receiver, whether he is your boss or your friend or your supervisor or your subordinate. Who is the person? What is the relation? What is the nature of relationship between you and that person? You need to understand that as well. Then what is the person's attitude towards your topic? All right. You also consider diversity issues like gender, culture, educational background of that receiver. For example, if a person whose educational level or background is not up to the mark, or is not he's not well educated, so when you write something, you will keep that in mind, and you will write something that will be very basic things, simple concepts or ideas or vocabulary you will use in order to make your message comprehensible, because you know that your receiver is not well versed or not educated as much. So you need to be very simple in your writing. And if you're writing your, let's say, if you're writing a person and who is female, so when you write something you need to address female with proper pronouns, for example her, she, etc. So you should keep these things in mind as well. Then comes that there are four types of audiences: high tech audience, low tech audience, lay audience, and multiple audience. So let's explore them one by one. First one is high tech audience. High tech audience mean high tech audience are workers or readers who work in your field of expertise. All right, for example, you are a computer scientist, and your colleague or the person who is reading your message or communication, he is also belongs to computer science department. All right, so that will be high tech audience. They might work directly in your department. They must be, they can be, they might be your colleagues. All right, they work with you, they are part of your department. They might work in similar capacity as yours in another organization. They may work in in an other organization, and they're doing the same job. The job you are performing, they also perform the same work or job. So they are your colleagues, they have relevant or specific experiences as you have, and they belong to your field. So they are your colleagues. So these people will be high tech audience. All right, so they are your colleagues because they share following things. They share educational background. I mean, if you have done BS CS, they also have that degree BScs. For example, you have work experience of 2 years. All right, just a second, please hold on for a moment. Assalamu alaikum. All right, sorry for the interruption. There was an important call from the department. All right, so uh, high tech audience are those people who share your educational background. For example, if you have computer science degree, so they do have that degree as well. And if you have 2 or 3 years working experience, they also have that kind of experience, and their level of understanding is almost equal to your level of understanding. All right, for example, the concept you know, or the level of concept you have in your mind, they also have that kind of level of understanding of computer science concepts. All right, so these are high tech audience. All right, so when you know that your audience is high tech audience, so what it tells you? It tells you that because they are expert in their field, so they will understand jargons, acronyms, and abbreviations. All right, for example, if you use technical language, jargons mean specific words or vocabulary for a specific field that is you can say related or connected with a specific field. Technical terminologies, so because they are expert, so whenever you write something you can use terminologies, technical terms, because they know those technical terms, because they are high tech audience. For example, in medical field, cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest is a technical term. It means that when your heartbeat, so your heart doesn't work properly, and you have a heart attack. All right, so that situation is considered or known as, in medical terminologies, we call it cardiac arrest. But whenever we use layperson, common man said heart failure. All right, but medical doctors, they say cardiac arrest. All right. Same is the case with spaghetti. Spaghetti usually we call it pasta. All right. But spaghetti in terms of the people who extinguish the fire, or firefighters. So when they call where is spaghetti, so it doesn't mean that they are asking for a certain food, or they are looking for spaghetti or pasta. Spaghetti means when the firefighters ask you, okay, where is spaghetti? It means where is the hose, where is the pump where they draw water in order to extinguish the fire. All right. So spaghetti basically, in technical terms, in technical terms, or in the field of firefighting, that has different meaning. Okay. All right. So acronyms. Acronyms and abbreviation formed from the initial letters of other words and pronounced as a word. FATA, for example, NAB, National Accountability Bureau. All right, now NAB is the acronyms of the uh, National Accountability Bureau. All right. So what we have done, we have taken initial letters of every word, and we make it a one word, and we pronounce it as a word, NAB. All right. Abbreviations mean definition is same, that we form abbreviation from the initial letters of the words, and but we don't pronounce them as a single word. For example, SI, FIA, ISI, ISSB. So we pronounce these letters as an individual letters, not a single word. FATA and ISSB. So these abbreviations and acronyms we can use in our writing when we are uh, dealing with, or when we are communicating with experts or high-tech audience, because they are expert and they know every terminology and technical term, because they are expert too. And when you want to convey something, so they requires minimum information, minimal details are required to to understand, to make that process understandable, because they know everything, because they belong to your field. So you don't need to give extra information about the project, or history of the project, or definition of the different terminologies or concepts, because they are expert, already expert in the field you're talking about. So you don't have to define or explain everything, because they shared certain knowledge and background, because they belong to the same field, they have expertise, they share work experience. So on that basis, you know their context, you know they are well versed or expert in the field of computer science. So you don't need to explain every definition and acronym or abbreviations, because they already knew these kind of concepts. Then comes low tech audience. So low tech audience are those workers or those people, uh, though they are familiar with your company, nonetheless they do not work, or sorry, they do not know the intricacies of the technical work. So low tech audience is those people who are not expert in your field. All right, they might work with you, for example, any technician, any assistant, a person who works for you, but he doesn't know anything, or he doesn't know everything about your field. He's not expert, he's not high tech person. So that is the person, that is the audience we call low tech audience. For example, a lab attendant working in a chemical engineering lab or a computer lab, for example, is a person who work as a technician or computer lab assistant in under your command, but he doesn't have CS degree, he doesn't have CS experience, he doesn't know in detail the terminologies or technical complexities of your field. Though he works with you, though he knows a little bit about your field, but is not expert of your field. So that is why that kind of audience is low tech audience. All right. All right, so there is another example that your boss can be a low-tech audience. For example, sometimes it happens that bosses, they are not technical people. They are managers. They manage the affairs of an organization, but they do not know the details of actually what is going on and how you develop a software, or what is this artificial intelligence, how it works. He doesn't know anything about that, but still he observes you, he manages the affair of the organization. So your boss might be low tech audience as well. Management is another example of that they may not understand your concepts, your complexities of your field. All right, so those people are low tech audience. So if your colleague is low tech audience and he doesn't familiar with your company's jargons, acronyms, so what will you do? You would explain them everything. All right, because they do not know much about your field, so you need to give them extra information, because they don't have educational background and experience of your field, and they don't have expertise in your field, they are not skilled persons in your field. So what all you have to do is just provide them extra information, so that they can understand your point of view, so they can understand your writing, what are you communicating. So you need to define and explain a little bit and terms and technology and terminologies, in order to make the communication process easier. All right, so you also need to provide them extra information, background information of any project, because they are not familiar with those things, so you need to explain them. Lay audience, again, as the name suggests, that lay audience is customers or clients who neither work for your company or nor have any knowledge about your field of expertise. They are lay audiences. All right, the people uh, who do not know anything about your field, or they do not work with you, they do not have any kind of experience in your field, so they are lay audiences. For example, when you write a user manual, so you write it uh, keeping in mind the lay audience. You do not use make it proper in a way that it should be understandable. It must be understandable for the reader. So you keep in mind lay audience before writing any user manual, because generally user manuals, they give detail about the products. So if you write high tech in high tech language or high flown words vocabulary, so they won't understand your communication, they won't understand your writing. So you should keep that in mind, that your readers, because they're lay audience and they do not share your experience and they don't have degree in computer science or whatever you want to explain. So if you want to communicate, if you are talking to lay audiences, you need to be uh, uh, you need to be you can say you need to explain everything. I mean, you need to explain everything. You need to provide every bits of information so that they can understand your point of view. So lay audience, they are not expert in your field, they have no educational background or work experience. So that's why that makes communication with lay audience difficult, a bit difficult. When a doctor is talking to a doctor, another doctor, so they communicate easily, they can understand each other, all right. But whatever they talk about, because they are expert in their field, so they can understand each other. But if a medical doctor is talking to an engineer or a lay person, he doesn't know anything about medical field or these symptoms or diseases or medication. So when the doctor will talk to a patient or a person who is not expert in medical field, who is not a medical doctor, so his conversation, his style will be entirely different. He will use different vocabulary, different abbreviations or jargon, and he'll explain in details. But if he's communicating with a doctor, so doctor is communicating with a doctor, so they already knew everything about medical field. So the conversation will be technical, and they will frequently use technical language because they know that we belong to the same field, and there will be no problem of understanding if we communicate, if we talk or communicate or use uh, technical language or jargons. So you need to add graphics, details, and in-depth analysis of your to make your point clearer to lay audience. So, because the lay audience doesn't know anything about your field, so you should provide them clarity, clear message, all right, concise and clear message. So, composing technical communication, we recognize these differences, and we should communicate accordingly. All right. So if you are talking to a lay person, lay audience, and you are writing, keeping in mind the technical audience, so you are inviting troubles. All right. So you are inviting troubles. You are making the communication worse because you are communicating with lay persons that don't share your knowledge, their background or educational background. So when you communicate with them with high flown words or technical terminologies, jargons, and without explaining them, so it would be very difficult for the reader to understand because he is lay audience. So if you are communicating, so if you do not keep in mind your audience, you are wasting your time and the time of your readers or audience as well. All right, because if you write something, if you have written a piece of paper and it is full of jargons and technical complexities, and the reader is lay audience and he doesn't know anything about your field, so it will take a little time for him to understand your point of view, so it will waste his time as well. Then comes multiple audience. Multiple audience is the amalgamation of low tech audience, high tech audience, and lay audience. All right. So sometimes it happens that the people you are communicating, they are not belong to one field or one expertise. They are from diverse background. Uh, so multiple audience can be in different situation when you write something. So when you make a speech or a conference or you want to write something, you should keep multiple audience in your mind, because it can happen that a person is listening to you. He might be a doctor or an engineer or a journalist, all right, or a computer scientist, and you are talking, you need to address everyone, because if audience is varied or uh, belong to different you can say background, so you make sure that your talk should be communicated effectively to all the audience and they can understand your point of view. So when the audience is multiple, so it there are chances that uh, your point of view uh, your point of view is understood by some of the audience, and some may not understand your point of view. It can happen. All right, so some of them need background information or some people do not. I mean, if they are expert in your field, if some of the people in your audience, they are expert in the field you are proposing or you are talking about, so it will be very easy for them, a piece of cake for them to understand what you are talking. But if they are layperson, if there are some people in your audience who are layperson, so how would you communicate that will cater their needs as well? So then writing to or communicating to multiple audience becomes a bit challenging or demanding. So these were the four types of uh, audiences. So we talked about there are four types of audiences: lay tech audience, low tech audience, high tech audience, and multiple audience. And if you want to communicate effectively, you need to understand your audience, their background, their educational background, their attitude towards topic, your communication, their gender. So these are the things you need to understand. And for example, if you are communicating to high tech persons, so that you can judicially use uh, jargons, acronyms, so because they know, because they're expert in your field, so they can easily understand your jargons, abbreviations you have used in writing. But if you're communicating to a low tech audience, though they work with you or under your supervision, but they're not expert in your field, they do not share they don't do not have any educational degree of your field, or they don't have any experience working in your field, so that person will be lay audience, sorry, low tech audience. So when you communicate them, you need to give them extra information to make your point of view comprehensible. And if you talking to a lay person, a person who neither works for you or neither or nor have any educational background, he's not expert, and he is not work as an assistant or you know as a as an assistant under your supervision. So when you communicate with that person, you need to be very careful while communicating, while writing jargons or abbreviations. And if you are writing and if you are using jargons or technical language, make sure explain those terminologies, because they are late audience. They do not know anything about your terminologies or your field. So you need to give them extra information, a little bit more information, so that they can understand your point of view. So it's very important, and if you do not keep in mind your audience, your communication will not be effective. I mean, though you have you are following certain principles of how to communicate effectively, but if you do not consider your audience and your message is not get across, so there is no use of your communication. So make sure whenever you write something, whenever you want to communicate, keep in mind your audience. Who is your audience? What is the educational background of that, of my receiver? uh, what is his qualification? What is his job's relation towards me? How he is related to me? What is his job title? All right, so that you can communicate accordingly. For example, if there is a boss, you would consider that he's your boss and he is at higher level. And then when you communicate with your boss, you will be very selective in your words. Your choice of words will be formal and entirely different as compared to the as compared if you are talking to your friend. So that's why uh, before communicating anything, before writing anything, we need to understand our audience. And if we do not understand our audience, then a disaster can happen. And error of miscommunication is inevitable. So that was it. uh, Types of audience.